What's up guys, and welcome back to another Pokemon Sun and Moon video, and today we are going to be looking at Alola Forms, taking a little break from Ultra Beast thankfully, and we're going to be talking about what Pokemon can actually get Alolan Forms. Now what I mean by this is specifically looking at Generation 1, since it looks like we are going to be getting only Generation 1 Alola Forms, since it's another throwback to, Gen 1 and such. So we're going to be specifically looking at Generation 1. I'm going to be picking out, assuming that the rest of the Alolan Forms we get are from Generation 1, apart from maybe one or two special ones, who knows, they're going to be from Generation 1, so it means we have to narrow down which of those, because obviously we've had, like 5 or, so a certain amount of Alolan Forms revealed already. We have Exeggutor, Vulpix and Ninetales, Sandslash and Sandslash, Rattata and Raticate, Meowth and presumably Persian, and then Marowak and Raichu. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 families of Alolan Pokemon so far. So that's not a huge amount. We assume we're going to get some more, possibly not revealed until the games are out, because hopefully that's the sort of thing that we like to get in the games. So we're going to be looking at the ones that could possibly get these Alolan Forms and, breaking out which are the most likely, which are the least likely and such. So how am I deciding what Pokemon can get an Alolan Form? Well, first up, obviously specifically looking at Generation 1 again, just mentioning that, I've taken out any Pokemon that is part of a starter line or is a legendary, because we assume for the most part it's unlikely that the starter Pokemon are going to get Alolan Forms, because it breaks the breaks the formula of starter Pokemon. Yes, some starters have got Megas, but that's a separate entity, whereas an Alolan Form is sort of like the second half of a line basically. So it would be weird just to break off the starters, and plus, what you're going to change a grass type starter to a fire? That's just not going to make sense. It would be a bit weird to change the formula basically. Same sort of thing with legendary Pokemon, plus why would they have different forms unless there's a special legendary that might be revealed or put in Generation 7 for example. So starters and legends by default are not very likely to get Alolan Forms, so we're ignoring those. We're also ignoring, for the purposes of this video, any Pokemon that is part of a line that has a Mega Evolution in it. Possibly because, I wouldn't see lines that have Megas getting Alolan Forms, because, imagine, we had that leak ages ago, or rumour, that possibly the Abra, Kadabra and Alakazam line was going to become fighting types as an Alolan Form. Yes, that sort of seems plausible, I suppose, but then what happens to Mega Alakazam in with the Alolan Form? What happens when you Mega Evolve an Alolan Form Alakazam? Do you get the normal Mega Alakazam, or do you get a second Mega Evolution that's fighting type and, a different design and such? Doing that, adding a Alolan Form to a line with a Mega in it means you have to basically make a whole of a Mega Evolution, which is sort of a bit of a weird thing. We don't know if they want to combine Megas and Alolan Forms quite yet. We might see in the future if they do one of them, then we can sort of open up to more, but currently it looks like they want to keep it separate, because it does seem like two kind of entities. They're both ways to revamp old Pokemon. Mega's obviously just adding on stuff, whereas the Alolan Form takes existing Pokemon and sort of messes them up a bit, I suppose you could say. They're both ways to revamp the old one, so it wouldn't make too much sense to do it on the same Pokemon on the same line. So for purposes of this, I'm not going to count any of those lines in Kanto. Also, I am discounting any split generation lines. Now, for example, we have Politoed here. Politoed is part of a split gen line, because in Generation 1 we have Poliwag, Poliwhirl and Poliwrath, and then in Generation 2 we had Politoed introduced, and Politoed could also evolve from Poliwhirl. Now, this is a bit of a slightly different one here. I've included some of these, we could include more if we wanted to, but the thing is, obviously, Poliwag, we have, if Poliwag gets an Alolan Form, it means that Politoed would presumably have to get an Alolan Form as well, you would assume, because obviously, if it's changing, yes, it means Poliwhirl will get one. Maybe Poliwrath gets one, cool, but what happens to Politoed? Does it just evolve into a normal Politoed from an Alolan Poliwhirl? It wouldn't make any sense. So some of them are included. For example, this the Poly line isn't very useful, but the Oddish line is. Oddish and Gloom. We also have Blossom in Generation 2. Oddish and Gloom are discounted, because obviously we're assuming if they've had Alolan Forms you have to give one to Blossom 2, which isn't in Generation 2, so we're ignoring that for the moment. But Vileplume could still get an Alolan Form. You just have a normal Gloom evolve into an Alolan Vileplume, so that's still counted there. So that's how it sort of works out there. In terms of pre-gen lines, so for example we have Pikachu and Raichu. Obviously Raichu already has an Alolan Form, even with Pichu being a Generation 2 Pokemon, but it's a pre-evolution, so it doesn't actually matter too much, because they can just add the Alolan Form halfway in the line, because the Alolan Form can happen anywhere along the line. It could happen with the first Pokemon, like we see with Vulpix and Ninetales. It could happen simply with the end one, like Cubone and Marowak. And obviously if it's a free line, it could even happen in the middle, but we'll see that if that happens in the future. So we're not counting any split gen lines apart from in particular cases, which obviously we'll see. And then finally, we're not going to be covering any Pokemon that have already been seen in Generation 7, i.e. in trailers or in promotional material, that have their normal Generation 1 forms. For example, Dragonite here. Dragonite was shown in one of the trailers, the Zygarde trailer I believe, if not a different one. Yeah, one of the Zygarde trailers was shown in Alola, we would assume. So, okay, we assume because it was shown in Alola to have its normal form, that it's not going to have an Alolan form. Of course, it still could, and it could be like a little single time thing, and it might be front trying to throw us off the scent, for example, but we're assuming for the most part that Pokemon that have appeared in their normal forms will not be getting Alola forms, except of course Meowth, because Meowth is a special case because it's not even seen in battle, it's kept by our mother in game. So those are sort of criteria that we will be adhering to for the most part. So it cuts it down a lot and gives us some idea. So these are the Pokemon, or the base Pokemon for each line that could get Alola forms. So you can see there are quite a few. If we count them up, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 lines or Pokemon that could get Alola forms from Generation 1. So we haven't really cut it down, well, we have cut it down a lot to be honest, but not huge. It's not like we only have like 4 or 5 left and we can say these are going to get Alola forms. So let's rank them from low to high and see which ones are more likely or less likely to get Alolan forms from this bunch. So on the low end of the scale, the ones that are, in my opinion at least, the least likely of the ones that can still get an Alolan form are, first up we have Clefairy and Clefable. It wouldn't make sense to give these Alolan forms because, as we've been told in several Pokemon media, they came from the moon. So, okay, unless you're going to do like a native Pokemon, native Earth version of Clefairy, it's not going to work as an Alolan form, basically. Then we have Diglett and Doug trio. Okay, you could give them Alolan forms, but what? It's a little head in the ground. You haven't got much creative, I don't know the right term for this. Creative, area to go with this. Where are you going to do? What are you going to do to Diglett? Are you going to make it like a steel type and give it an iron head? Yeah, brilliant, good design there. Everyone's going to love that. It's not very likely. Then we have Voltorb and Electrode. Yes, okay, there are the cool designs out there where we have like a Great Ball version of Voltorb and an Ultra Ball version of Electrode. That's really cool. It would be really cool to see that in game, but I don't think it's going to happen really. It wouldn't make sense in terms of, canon and stuff. We have obviously Voltorb and Electrode based on the normal Pokeball. Why would Alola particularly be a Great or an Ultra Ball? It just wouldn't make sense in that that sort of way. So I don't see it happening particularly. Then we have Mr. Mime and Jinx next. I'm putting them together because they have very similar situations. They both have pre-evolutions, obviously Smoochum from Generation 2 and Mime Jr. from Generation 4. I can't really see it happening. What are you going to do to Jinx and Mr. Mime? Yes, okay, if you want to keep it Gen 1, particular, you have to keep Smoochum and Mime Jr. how they are, so you can only do it on the final part of the line. What are you going to do here? Yes, okay, we've seen the cool design of the Jinx Hula Dance, so that could work, that's a possibility, but I just don't see it happening in my opinion. It's a very low chance. And Mr. Mime, no one likes Mr. Mime, basically. I mean, no, obviously people do like him. It's just what you would do with him while keeping the name Mr. Mime. He has to be a sort of mime still, you just have to theme him to Alola, which might be a bit difficult for instance. And then finally for the low chance, we have Omanity, Omastar, Kabuto and Kabutops. They are fossil Pokemon. Yes, it's possible for them to get Alola forms, but I don't see it happening. I've spoken about this in previous videos, giving them Alola forms that would be like their original cells, so without the rock type and without the fossil restoration. It would be really cool to see, but I don't see it happening because it would revamp fossil Pokemon basically, and unless you're going to do it to all the fossil Pokemon, it just wouldn't make sense in my opinion. So that's why it's on the low list there, but of course if you do think any of those could get Alola forms, do let me know down below. Then we move on to the medium chance, the ones that could get them. You could see some designs for them, but aren't like they sort of jump out at you and you could see it straight away. Starting off, we have Nidoran female line and the Nidoran male line. We have had rumours that the Nidoking and Nidoqueen will be getting like poison fighting type ones, but of course we've never seen nothing of that yet. Basically, it could happen. Obviously Nidoran female and male could be kept all the same, and then Nidorino and even Nidorina could be kept the same, and then as you evolve to the final form, you could add on a fighting type or a steel type rather than the ground type, just to edge out a bit. But it's not like the design sort of jumps straight out of you or would fit particularly well, I suppose. But it is still possible. I could see it happening. Then after that we have a Vileplume, which of course is the single Pokemon on its own. Thanks, as I mentioned earlier, we have Blossom in Generation 2, so you can't really give Gloom a Alolan form because it just wouldn't make sense if you want to keep it Gen 1 exclusive. So Vileplume, I could see an Alolan form happening here. You'd have to change basically the type of flower would be the only change here. And obviously Grass Poison typing, maybe you could change like Grass Fairy or something similar to that, but apart from that, it's not a... there's no huge design change that leaps out at you here for a Vileplume. It's based on a flower, so you can't really take away the grass typing unless you're going to make it like pure fairy, maybe and have like a fairy-like flower. It's just, it sort of limits you. The design limits you because it is incorporating a flower, which is inherently a grass type sort of design choice, and you can't really change the base type of it. Then after that we have Venomoth and Venonat. Possible because of course they have no ties anywhere else. I guess I could see it happening. Obviously, maybe not necessarily Venonat, but Venomoth particularly could go a fairy psychic type, a fairy bug fairy type, something along those lines. It fits a few of those sort of typings, just with a few changes of maybe like take off the poisonness of its design in terms of what poisonous it has on its design. Don't ask me. But, make its wings more flowing, make its body more more light, I suppose, than its current one, and it could happen basically. Then we have Victreebel or Bellsprout. Weepinbell and Victreebel, remember its name. Yes, they can get Alolan forms, but I don't think they should because their design makes sense for Alola anyway. They're based on flycatchers and obviously stuff like that, plants, and obviously they live in the jungle where those plants can be found in jungles and forests and such. So it makes sense on Alola for a tropical island for Victreebel to be there hanging about, waiting for an unsuspecting Pokemon to fly or drive by to eat it basically. So I feel like that would work best rather than giving it an Alolan form. Then we have Tentacool and Tentacruel. Yes, okay, they could get Alolan forms. I could see a few ideas there. Maybe sort of like Steel Poison rather than a Water Poison. I can't speak. I don't want to say make it a land jellyfish because that wouldn't really work. But you could maybe alter its design. So instead of being Water Poison, it'd be Water Steel. Maybe make it sort of more menacing if it can be made more menacing. You guys get the idea there. There aren't any huge design sort of choices or ideas that leap straight out of you. Then following up with that we have Ponyta and Rapidash. Now in sort of conversely, I can actually see a few different ideas for a Ponyta Rapidash Alola form. You could take off the fire typing, you can maybe add a fairy flying one, because obviously it's based on Pegasus, and flying horses I suppose, so fairy flying would work in some aspect, or a flying type in general. I don't want to just see just a fire flying one, because that would just be a bit sort of, fire flying, great, 4 times against the rock has made it worse. The one other typing I'm throwing around for this would be a water typing, maybe have it like run on water, have water flowing down its mane instead of fire. And it would be really quite interesting, sort of similar to like the water type Arcanine we heard of, but making more sense in this aspect, because obviously you can just have water instead of fire, have it run across water and stuff like that, have a water horse basically, which can have some design choices coming in there. So that's just my pick there. Then after that we have Farfetch'd, obviously just a Pokemon sitting on its own in Generation 1, no relatives at all. In terms of whether to get a Alola form, I suppose you could revamp it and suppose maybe make it a bit more popular, having like a fighting flying type or grass flying type because of its leak. In terms of the design changes, I don't know what you really do. It's based on a duck. Unless you're going to drastically overhaul its design, I can't see what you'd get from it, but that's just my opinion. Moving on from that, we have Doduo and Dodrio. Again, we had a leak saying it was going to be a fighting flying type in Alola. I could see that because it has these big powerful legs that can be used for kicking and such. But inherently it's a bird, so you could be very similar to Hawlucha, I suppose. It's not Hawlucha, just sort of based on a bird, but fighting flying types for it might make sense, it might not. Maybe just for Dodrio rather than just both of them. Dodrio could just merge into that fighting type, who knows. And then after that, following on from that, we have Seal and Dugong, which of course were water and water ice types in Generation 1. In terms of you maybe get like a tropical seal, I suppose, and take off the ice type for a Dugong and have, I don't know what you'd really make it. What would you turn a seal into? That's not a water. You have a water type. You can't really take the water type off, is what I'm saying here. And what would you add on? Ground? That's not really going to work, is it? Unless you sort of overhaul its design and maybe some sort of psychic type seal. I can't see really too much change for that there. Sort of a basic design. And then finally we have Goldeen and Seaking. Fish again, so you can't really take fish out of water because what are you going to do, remove the water typing? Yeah, okay, now it's got to be a land fish, so unless you gave it legs and such, which would look really weird. I can't really see it changing too much in an Alola form, apart from like water fairy type would be my only choice there, but still, that's not too obvious. So that's the last of the medium ones. We can actually finally move to the ones, in my opinion, are very likely to get Alola Forms that you can grab designs out easily for. Starting off with Ekans and Arbok. We've seen some regional differences with Arbok, several times now because of its design on its chest, but I could see an overhaul of Arbok's design for the Alola region, maybe Ekans as well, who knows, but maybe make like a dark poison type, and just a pure dark type. Say it's lost its poisonous, it's lost its venom basically when it came to Alola, but it's gained the dark typing instead to become nocturnal, something along those lines. I feel like that will work pretty well. After that we have Psyduck and Golduck. Spoken about Golduck Alola form in a previous video of mine. I feel like you could take the water type off of it because yes, they're based on ducks, but they don't have to live in water, they have hands and feet. It's not like Goldeen and Sea King where they just have fins. You could change it around so it could be a land animal, have it just be a pure psychic type, because we all know Golduck likes to be psychic, and that would fit pretty well in my opinion. It's just an idea, of course. Then we have Graveler, Golem and Geodude, set in completely wrong order, but you guys get the idea. I could see this really happening. With Golem, we've had a few ideas throwing about from the Alola form, maybe like a fire rock type or a rock. Take off the rock type, completely have like a pure fire type, maybe like based on magma sort of thing. I could see it happening definitely. You could have a fire coming through the cracks. Only reason I would say probably not for this is because it's a trade evolution. Now whether or not they want to limit it to normal evolutions or want to incorporate trade evolutions still, it's up to them, of course, up to the Pokemon Company and Game Freak. But yeah, I could see it happening definitely. Whether this change would go down to Geodude and Graveler as well, I couldn't really say it. You could keep them both rock ground and just have it change to a rock fire type in its final form, because obviously if we do, what would you change Geodude and Graveler into if you were to add a fire typing to it? Maybe just make it like melting rather than just solid rock. I don't know, but yeah, that's that there. Those are the three. Then we move on to Grimer and Muck. Again, we had a rumour saying there's going to be a ground water type Grimer and Muck. I would really like to see that based on mud, basically. So the idea behind poison types becoming Alolan forms would be they'd be sort of, there's no contamination in the area, basically. So instead of being poison types, they just become, ground types and live with the environment because it's nice and clean. And I think that would really work really well, responding to environment stimuli. Just becoming ground water type instead, being huge hunks of mud. I feel like it would be really cool to see. So that's just my opinion, of course. Then we have Krabby and Kingler, two crabs, of course, both pure water types in Generation 1. I would like to see a land crab design for these. I've spoken to people about this a few times, having Krabby as like a land crab rather than being water type, so you could change it to a ground water, or maybe even a pure ground type. You don't have to, maybe ground steel, maybe if you wanted to change the claws, or maybe just pure ground maybe would work best. But you make it to ground type, instead of having these claws and pincers being, actual claws and pincers, you could have like a flat side to it, so we used to scoop up dirt and dig in the ground and become a land crab. Basically, it's a thing in real life. Why not be a thing in Pokemon? Who knows? And then finally, the last line we have is of course Coughing and Wheezing, very similar to Muck and Grimer. It is possible to have sort of like a pure design for these. So I mean, the design of the style I'm using in the thumbnail actually is like a water fairy one, because it's bubbles rather than poison gas. Another one is of course the fire types. Maybe I can make it poison fire, or maybe just a pure fire type and have it actual like be fiery rather than poison, but instead of burning poison gas, it burns oxygen, for example, and that would be really interesting to see, I think. So any of these 6 lines really I would love to see as Alola forms, but how many will we get? Because of course you can't overflow them. You don't want all of Generation 1 to be Alolan forms and megas and that be it. So how many are we likely to get? Well, I went back and looked at how many Mega Evolutions were introduced in X and Y, and there was a total of 26 Mega Evolutions in X and Y. That's a lot of Mega Evolutions. And as I said earlier, we currently have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, or in total we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Alolan Pokemon. So, okay, even if we were to say Pokemon to Mega Evolutions, there's still another 16 Alolan Pokemon we need to add, and obviously if you were to say lines, we have 7 to 26, that's a lot more lines. I don't want them to add 19 more Alolan lines though, so I'm going to go with 16 more Alolan Pokemon. And if we have most lines in Generation 1 are 2 long lines, there's another 8 Alolan lines if we keep it similar to Mega Evolutions. Now, we're assuming Mega Evolutions aren't going to be introduced again, aren't going to be, no more new Mega Evolutions is what I'm trying to say here, are coming in X in Sun and Moon. I don't think it's going to happen, but it could do, of course. But assuming it's not, 26 more Alolan Pokemon would make sense. 26 out of 151 from Generation 1, that's only sort of, a sixth of all of Generation 1 Pokemon, so it would make sense. Have 26 more, so maybe like a mix of second half of lines, full lines, so maybe we'll see like, you know, another, so 16 more Pokemon, so maybe like 8 lines, 8 more lines, or, you know, maybe like 12 more lines, you know, included, maybe not full lines, but, you know, 12 more lines involved with the Alola Forms sort of thing from Generation 1, but of course that's just my idea. I've spoken for 20 minutes, how have I spoken for 20 minutes, jeez. Anyway, what I want to know, guys, is, do you want me to go over these Alolan Forms in more depth, or possible Alolan Forms in more depth, and do, you know, Alolan speculation videos, so picking out these forms I've spoken about, and putting forward ideas for what they could be, typings, and sort of the backstory as well, because obviously Megas we can just put forward, oh yeah, look, be this typing and have this ability, but whereas Alolan Forms really have to have some sort of backstory to it, so why did it change type, why did it change design, and that would be really fun for me to go. So go for it. So if you want me to go over at least these, you know, these high chance ones I've gone over at the end, these last 6, or maybe a few more after that, in a separate video to sort of give my ideas, and obviously you guys can give your ideas too. Do let me know down below, because it'd be really fun for me to do. But for now, this is going to be it for me for today, so if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, and let me know down below, of course. Don't forget to do that. Let me know down below what Pokemon, what Kanto Pokemon you think are going to get Alolan Forms, you know, for the rest of Sun and Moon. I'll be seeing you next time though, so thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.